How do you know if you are being spiritually abused? Spiritual abuse is something that is not easily detected. And for a lot of people that I've worked with, they'll let me know that they only recognize the signs of spiritual abuse in hindsight. And that's not uncommon. Spiritual abuse is subtle and it builds over time. And so in this video, I'm going to explain some ways that you can tell whether you're being spiritually abused or not. So let me introduce myself. My name is Dr. Felicia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And um, my my goal for this video is to help inform you about signs that spiritual abuse is occurring around you. So the first thing I would say is feeling the pressure to appear perfect. For a lot of individuals who have been spiritually abused, they feel like they can't share weaknesses or challenges with people around them because they're often shamed for it, or people, regardless of their intentions, are making things worse. And so this tends to happen a lot, especially if you are dealing with a mental illness. And so you'll hear people in spiritually abusive environments tell people that if they're dealing with any mental health symptoms, that it is a character flaw on their part and an indication that that there's something wrong with their spirituality or that they're not spiritual enough. So that's one sign that you could be being spiritually abused. Another sign is pressure to do things quickly, right? Think about a time when you've been in a romantic relationship or even a friendship where you felt like the other person was trying to rush the process. In spiritually abusive environments, something similar happens, right? And I've talked about this in some other videos. I talk about the concept of love bombing and how spiritually abusive environments really try to get people to get on board right away. And that's a form of control, right? And so instead of going through the process of friendship and getting to know a person and just vetting the community, make sure that you feel comfortable, spiritually abusive environments will try to pressure you to do too much too soon. And that's something really important to watch out for. I have another video about how spiritually abusive environments weaponize vulnerability. And when you've been through spiritual abuse, you might feel like people are pushing you to share more than you're comfortable with. Another sign that you may be experiencing spiritual abuse is the fear of making decisions. In spiritually abusive environments, they tend to be very controlling. And one thing that they do in these environments, and spiritual abusive leaders as well, is that they make it seem like you're not capable of making your own decisions. So they might say, well, before you get married or before you date someone or before you buy a house, ask this person or get permission from the leader or people in the environment. And while it's great, I think to get input from people you trust, you are an autonomous being and you can make decisions for yourself. But in these environments, they try to make it seem like you can't make decisions for yourself, or, maybe, you're not objective. And so you need to get their okay, the green light from them to proceed. Another thing that can happen in spiritually abusive environments is that the person who is being abused feels like a tool, right? They feel like they're only valuable for what sort of service they can provide to that environment. And, when we look at things in the news, stories in the news about environments where people have been spiritually abused, a lot of times they are extracting free labor from them. And so it's like, well, if you're going to be part of this community, you have to serve this many hours. Now, they're not going to come out and say that, but they feel a lot of pressure if they can't make a certain event or they're busy and they just can't serve, or they just don't want to, right? Like you can't, a lot of times spiritually abusive environments and people don't realize that you can't force people to do things. You can suggest, you can make recommendations, but in the end, people are going to do what they're going to do. And so in these types of environments, people often feel like a tool. They feel like they're being used. They feel like the spiritually abusive leader and environment only cares about what they can provide for them, right? And that goes on to my next one is that in these environments, it can seem like it's a cult of personality, right? And one trait of these environments is that it's charisma in a person is more important than what their inner character is like, right? And this was mentioned in a podcast about a spiritually abusive church. And the person that was, that talked about it said charisma over character is one of their rules. And so you might feel like everything revolves around the leader, around protecting the leader. It's almost as if the leader's needs and wants and everything else about the leader take precedence over the entire environment. And that's not healthy. And so you might hear people say, well, this leader says this or this leader says that, and quote it as if like it's something that they have to live by, right? And listen, there are people that influence us all the time. There's nothing wrong with admiring somebody or even saying, oh, this person said this and I agree with it. But when it becomes excessive and when you feel like people really can't think for themselves or don't want to, that can be a sign of spiritual abuse. And then also another thing that can happen is in spiritually abusive environments is feeling dismissed a lot of times. And I talk about this in a video. I think it's called something about spiritual bypass. And so I want you to go watch that video if you don't understand what spiritual bypass is. But in these types of environments, individuals often feel like that they are dealing with serious issues. They're dealing with complex issues that require nuance and wisdom to understand. And instead, it's just dismissed. And so they might hear a lot of cliches and platitudes like, oh, well, just forgive and forget, or nobody's perfect, or, some sort of spiritual principle that, yes, in principle or in, and if you look at it from a broader sense, it's true, but it might not entirely deal with the situation at hand. And so people have told me that they've been told that they just are low vibrational, and though that's the reason why they're having all these issues, or you just need to live in love and light, or you just need to be more humble or be more this, or all things work out for your good. And again, you know these sorts of things are used to dismiss challenges that people are dealing with. And so if you're feeling dismissed a lot, that could also be a sign of spiritual abuse, because in that dismissal there is also control. And the way that that kind of happens is that, if you're dealing with really challenging issues and you keep hearing the same answers over and over again, it breaks you down and you feel like you're not important. And sometimes people have said that when they felt that way, they kept trying harder and harder to gain somebody's approval. And that's just working in the spiritually abusive leader or environment's favor. Another thing is paranoia. And the reason this happens is, a lot of people have told me that when they've been through these spiritually abusive experiences, that they feel like they're always being watched, like they feel like they're waiting for, the other shoe to drop, or they just feel like they can't ever be at peace, like they're being monitored. And that unfortunately does happen in spiritually abusive environments. So people have talked about how their social media was stalked. They'll say, well, we had this event Friday, but we saw on whatever social media platform it was that you were at a party, right? Or they might say something to somebody expecting it to be held in confidence, and then someone else hears it and says, well, why did you say this? Or what's going on? Or how come we didn't know about it, right? And so things like being told that you have to account for your attendance. Well, where were you this week? And why didn't you do this? And again, if you can make a commitment to do something and you don't show up, then of course, it's, you need to be accountable. But I'm talking about where people's whereabouts are just being monitored all the time, and they feel like they can't, that they have to be at every event. If they're sick one week or they just don't want to attend, or they're, just doing other things, it's like, well, where were you and why weren't you here? And being put in the position of always having to defend and explain themselves. And that is a way, again, of gaining control, because there's already a power dynamic between a leader and, a member of an environment. And so when that power dynamic is strengthen even more when you're always having to justify and explain your actions. It just puts you more at that spiritually abusive leader and environment's mercy. So I hope this helps. I'd love to hear from you in the comments too about spiritual abuse and the signs of it. Have you been through that before? Have you experienced these? Maybe that there's some that I didn't talk about that you'd like to, bring up in the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to book a free consultation with me, you can go to my website, which is skillsetcounseling.com, and click on the button that says, it's an orange button, and it says book your free consultation. So I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. Bye-bye.